I never imagined my life would unravel in a single evening, in a living room full of people who were never supposed to have power over my heart. If you had asked me just a few months ago, I would have said I was in a stable, loving relationship, 2 years together, real conversations about moving in, meeting each other's families, laughing in kitchens at midnight, whispering plans for the future. I believed in that future. I believed in him. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the moment my boyfriend looked me in the eyes and said, "It's over. I'm done pretending." And the worst part? He wasn't alone. His four closest friends sat there on the couch like judges at some twisted talent show, staring at me with this sick anticipation, as if they were waiting for a performance. My performance. The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. My breath caught in my throat. Something in their faces told me this wasn't real. This wasn't a breakup born from pain or incompatibility. This was staged, scripted, coordinated. A test. Except they didn't know that I already knew. Because the night before, around 2 in the morning, I had gotten up for water. His phone lit up on the table. I hadn't touched it, but the message preview glowed straight at me like a warning I wasn't supposed to see. One of his friends had texted him, "Tomorrow's going to be hilarious. Can't wait to see how she reacts to the fake breakup. If she cries, I'm recording it." I had taken a screenshot, not because I wanted proof, but because I needed to remind myself later that I wasn't crazy. So when he said, "It's over," and waited for me to fall apart, I didn't crumble, I didn't scream, I didn't beg. I simply smiled. A calm, steady smile that wiped the smugness off every face in that room. "Good," I told him softly. "Then I won't have to pretend I didn't see last night's messages." In that instant, everything shifted. The shock, the guilt, the panic. Something happened in that room none of them expected. And it was the moment I realized the relationship I thought I had never actually existed. People always say you can feel it in your bones when something isn't right. But when you love someone, when you're invested, when you've built a future in your head and in your heart, you learn to silence those bones. You learn to explain away the uneasiness, the hesitation, the small cracks that form long before the relationship actually breaks. I'm 35, and for most of my adult life, I've been the kind of woman who loves steadily, quietly, with intention. I don't play games. I don't test people. I don't force loyalty. I give it, and I expect it in return. When I met him, that felt like the first time someone matched the energy I carried inside me. We met at a friend's dinner party, one of those crowded apartments where laughter spills into the hallway and you can barely hear yourself think. He stood out immediately, not because he tried to, but because he didn't. He was warm, attentive, funny, in this understated way that drew me in without effort. His eyes lingered when I spoke. He remembered small details. He volunteered to walk me to my car even though it was raining. By our second date, I thought, this one is different. And for a long time he was. We spent weekends exploring the city, sharing playlists, volunteering at community events, and taking slow, quiet walks after dinner. He introduced me to his parents early, something I admittedly found surprising, but sweet. His mother welcomed me with warm hands and soft eyes. His father was reserved, but kind. And somewhere along the way, I started to picture myself belonging there, part of that family. But there was always one thing I couldn't quite connect with: his friends. There were 4 of them, tight-knit, inseparable, like a childhood club that had never matured emotionally. They were loud, opinionated, always inserting themselves into situations that didn't concern them. They commented on our relationship constantly, in ways that felt harmless at first, until they didn't. It started with little interruptions. They would call him in the middle of our date nights and insist he join them just for an hour. They would tease him, tease us, in front of me, waiting for a reaction. They invited themselves into moments that were supposed to be intimate. They'd arrive at his place unannounced and stay until late, leaving me awkwardly sipping wine on the couch while they dissected inside jokes I wasn't part of. Still, I tried. I told myself that loving someone meant accepting the people they loved. But 6 months ago, things shifted. His friends started testing me in ways that didn't feel playful anymore. They would watch me, really watch me, whenever they made comments about relationships or trust. One of them even said once, "Girls always act perfect until things get real." I laughed politely, but something in me tightened. They'd encourage him to cancel our plans last minute for boys' night and then study my reaction. They'd poke at my boundaries, my patience, my loyalty, as if I were some experiment they were trying to crack open. I told myself not to overthink it. I wanted to believe they were harmless, just immature, and he always reassured me, "They're just joking, babe. They don't mean anything by it." But jokes don't leave bruises on your spirit. Jokes don't chip at your sense of safety. Jokes don't test the elasticity of your heart until something finally snaps. Looking back now, all the signs were there. The whispered conversations between him and his friends when he thought I couldn't hear. The way he sometimes hesitated before choosing me over them. The way they looked at me. Curious, judgmental, intrusive. Maybe I should have questioned more. Maybe I should have walked away sooner. But love makes you patient to a fault. It makes you hope people will choose you the way you choose them. And I truly believed, naively maybe, that he would. I never imagined his friends would one day push him into staging a breakup just to see how I'd react. I never imagined he would agree. The real cracks didn't show up all at once. They appeared slowly, almost delicately, like hairline fractures spreading across glass. If you weren't looking directly at them, you could pretend they weren't there. You could convince yourself that the surface was still intact. But deep down, something inside me had already begun to shift. It started with the way he pulled back. Not dramatically, not in a way you could point to and say, "There, that's the moment everything changed." No, it was subtle, insidious. Conversations shortened. Plans became flexible, but only for his friends. My presence in his life felt less like a priority and more like an optional accessory. At first, I blamed stress. Work had been demanding for both of us. I told myself everyone goes through low energy phases. But then the strange behavior began, moments that didn't align with who he used to be. Like the time we were supposed to have dinner at my place. I'd cooked his favorite dish, lit candles, even bought a bottle of wine we had once shared on an anniversary. He texted 30 minutes before arriving. "Hey, the guys just invited me out. Rain check?" No apology, no explanation, just a casual pivot away from me. Or the night his friends accidentally showed up at the bar where he and I were having a quiet drink. They joined our table without asking, pulled him into their loud energy, and made jokes at my expense. Lighthearted on the surface, but sharp underneath. "Careful," one of them smirked. "She looks like she's evaluating us, like we're meeting the parents." They all laughed. He laughed too. I told myself not to take it personally, but something in my chest tightened in a way I couldn't ignore. The group chat messages were even stranger. Sometimes, while leaning against him on the couch, I'd hear his phone vibrate. He'd read something quickly, then tilt the screen away. Not enough to be suspicious, just enough to be wrong. Little flickers of guilt would cross his face. Not guilt toward me, but toward them. Like he was complicit in something that involved all of them, but not me. When I'd ask, "Everything okay?" he'd always answer the same way. "Yeah, it's nothing, just the guys." But nothing doesn't make your boyfriend's shoulders tense. Nothing doesn't make his friends suddenly go silent the second I walk into a room. Once, during a game night at his place, I came back from the kitchen and caught all 4 of his friends staring at me. Not in a mean way, not in a sexual way, but in a curious way. Like they were studying me, evaluating me, waiting for me to reveal some flaw they'd been whispering about. One of them muttered, "She didn't even react," under his breath. The others chuckled like they knew a joke I wasn't told. When I asked, "React to what?" they all shrugged, pretending innocence. My boyfriend brushed it off. "Ignore them, babe. They're idiots." But this wasn't harmless idiocy. It was deliberate, coordinated, and every time something like this happened, the distance between us grew wider. The worst part wasn't their behavior. It was his. I watched him become 2 different people. The man I loved when we were alone, gentle, funny, thoughtful, and the man he became around them, eager to please, overly influenced, almost desperate for their approval. Their grip on him tightened over the months, and every time they pushed, he followed. Every time they questioned my intentions, he entertained it. Every time they joked about me, he laughed along, and the laughter carved little wounds in places I didn't realize were vulnerable. I wasn't losing him to another woman. I was losing him to a crowd of boys who refused to grow up. And the saddest part? I stayed because I kept waiting for the man I fell in love with to come back. I didn't know then that those small cracks were leading to something much bigger. The moment they'd persuade him to test me in the cruelest way possible. The fake breakup was not a sudden betrayal. It was the culmination of months of erosion. And deep inside, I think part of me already knew. The day everything snapped didn't begin dramatically. It started like any other Friday. Busy, ordinary, forgettable. I woke up early, made coffee, answered emails, handled meetings. Nothing in my morning hinted that by evening, my entire understanding of love, trust, and partnership would be shattered. Around noon, my phone buzzed. His name on the screen made me smile at first, until I read the message. "We need to talk tonight." 6 simple words. Cold, formal, devoid of warmth or the gentle tone he usually used with me. My stomach tightened as if someone had reached inside and twisted it, but I forced myself to stay calm. Maybe he wanted to talk about something serious, like moving in together. We'd been dancing around that conversation for months, or maybe he wanted to discuss meeting my extended family again. He and my cousin had gotten along well. It could have been anything. But the truth? I felt fear. A quiet, creeping fear I pretended not to hear. By the time I reached his apartment at 7 p.m., a pit had settled in my stomach. The hallway felt colder than usual. Even the sound of my footsteps seemed too loud, echoing down the corridor like a warning I didn't yet understand. I knocked. He opened the door almost immediately, as if he'd been standing right behind it. But it wasn't his face that shattered me. It was the room behind him. 4 of his closest friends were sitting on the couch, lined up, stiff, expectant, like a jury waiting for a verdict. Their eyes weren't warm or welcoming. They looked hungry, curious, anticipating something. My heart skipped a beat. "What's going on?" I asked, voice steady, but eyes scanning all of them. He didn't meet my gaze. He stepped back, letting me inside, but kept a distance like I was a stranger. "Thanks for coming," he said. The way he said it felt rehearsed. I stood near the coffee table, refusing to sit. Something was deeply wrong. Finally, he inhaled sharply, as if preparing for a performance, and said the words that turned my world to stone. "I think we need to end this. It's over. I'm done pretending." The silence that followed was suffocating. The air felt thick, heavy, impossible to breathe. But what struck me most wasn't the sentence itself. It was the way his friends leaned forward slightly, waiting, ready, waiting for my reaction, for tears, for begging, for heartbreak they could measure like entertainment. My throat tightened, but not because I believed him. No, because I finally understood the ugliness beneath everything I'd been feeling for months. This wasn't real. This wasn't his decision. This was a test. A test they had designed, a test he had agreed to. And the most twisted part? They were enjoying it. Somewhere deep in my chest, something snapped, not from pain, but from clarity. They didn't know what I knew. They didn't know I had seen the message the night before, glowing innocently on his lock screen at 2 a.m. Tomorrow's going to be hilarious. Can't wait to see how she reacts to the fake breakup. If she cries, I'm recording it. My hands had shaken when I saw it, not from betrayal, but from disbelief, from the realization that people who claimed to care about me saw my heart as a spectacle. I'd taken a screenshot, not out of revenge, but so I wouldn't gaslight myself later, so I'd remember this wasn't paranoia. And now, standing in that living room, surrounded by their expectant faces, I felt everything inside me go still. Quiet, dangerously calm. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in our entire relationship, I didn't recognize him. Then I smiled. A small smile, controlled, sharp enough to slice through the tension. "Good," I said softly, then added, "Then I don't have to pretend I didn't see last night's messages." Every face in the room changed instantly. Shock, confusion, fear. His brows furrowed. "What messages?" I pulled out my phone, opened my photos, and held up the screenshot. The message glowed on the screen like a confession no one had intended to be caught. One of his friends went pale. Another opened his mouth to speak but shut it again, suddenly unsure. The room's energy shifted from smug to terrified. In seconds. He stepped forward, squinting at the phone. I watched the moment the words registered in his mind, the moment he realized I wasn't supposed to know. "You saw that?" he whispered. "I did." I kept my voice steady. "And I need you to say out loud what this was." He froze. His friends froze. "A test," I continued for him. "A fake breakup. You wanted to see how I'd react, and your friends planned to record me crying." His mouth opened and closed like the words wouldn't form. "It wasn't," he started. "What was it then?" I pressed gently. "Because the message is clear. The intent is clear." One of his friends snapped defensively. "We just wanted to see if you really cared. Guys leave when things get serious. We were trying to help him." I laughed once, a bitter, humorless sound. So you manufactured a crisis instead of trusting 2 years of a relationship? He swallowed hard. It was supposed to be quick. You were supposed to fight for me. Then we'd tell you it was a joke and move on. A joke, I repeated. Breaking up with someone, as entertainment. No one spoke, no one dared. And that was when the final realization hit me. The man I loved let this happen. He didn't defend me. He didn't stop them. He didn't choose me. He chose them. And that's the moment my love for him began to die. For a few seconds after the confrontation, no one moved, no one breathed. It felt like all the air had been vacuumed out of the room, leaving behind only that awful, raw silence, the kind that forces you to confront a truth you wish you weren't living. I could feel my pulse in my throat, in my fingertips, in the fragile space behind my eyes. But I wasn't crying. I didn't feel anger yet, either. What I felt was hollow, like everything inside me had suddenly collapsed inward. He looked at me with wide, confused eyes, eyes that used to be warm, soft, full of affection. Now they were frantic, darting between me, the screenshot, and his friends, as if searching for the right script to follow. I didn't think you'd find out, he said quietly. A sharp pain pulsed through my chest. Because that was the problem, wasn't it? He hadn't thought about how I would feel. He had only thought about the test, about the spectacle. You shouldn't have had to think about me finding out, I replied. My voice trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of every realization hitting me at once. You should have thought about how this would hurt me if I didn't. He stepped closer, hands out slightly like he wanted to reach for me. I stepped back immediately. Don't, I whispered. The word felt heavy on my tongue, like it carried the entire 2 years of our relationship with it. His arms dropped. One of his friends cleared his throat nervously. It wasn't meant to be cruel. I cut him off with a glare sharp enough to silence him. I'm not talking to you. Because I wasn't. This wasn't about them, not entirely. They had engineered the test, sure. They had pushed, encouraged, prodded him into doing something monstrous. But he had chosen it. He had let their opinions be louder than mine. He had allowed them to treat my emotions like an experiment. He was the one I loved. He was the one who owed me truth. He was the one who failed. I turned to him fully now. Tell me why. Tell me what made you think this was okay. He swallowed hard. I don't know. They kept saying you seemed too perfect, that you must be hiding something, that maybe you were only acting committed. I stared at him, stunned. So instead of trusting what you've seen for 2 years, you trusted their paranoia? I panicked, he admitted. His voice cracked slightly. I was scared. I didn't want to lose you. And your solution to that fear, I said slowly, was to fake breaking up with me. To see if I would cry hard enough to prove I cared? The absurdity stung. The cruelty stung more. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing slightly now. It sounds terrible, I know, but it was supposed to be quick. You were supposed to fight for us. Then we'd tell you it was a joke, and... A joke, I repeated, bitterness curling through my voice. Humiliating me was supposed to be a joke. No one was trying to humiliate you, he said, but even he couldn't maintain eye contact when he said it. I gestured toward the screenshot. Your friend literally said she'd record me crying. Silence. My breath trembled. My hands trembled. But my voice stayed steady, even if it was soft, fragile at the edges. Do you understand what you did? You staged a trauma. You built an emotional ambush. You made me walk into a room where everyone knew something I didn't, just to see if I'd fall apart. He looked like he wanted to argue, but nothing came out. Say something, I whispered. Say anything that makes this make sense. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. I thought if you cried or fought for me, it would mean we were unshakable. I let out a broken laugh, one of disbelief, pain, and exhaustion woven into one fragile sound. You want to know what makes a relationship unshakable? I asked softly. Trust, communication, respect, not whatever this is. His friends shifted uncomfortably, exchanging guilty looks. Good. Maybe, for the first time, their actions were catching up to them. He took a shaky step toward me again. I'm sorry. Please, we can fix this. I shook my head slowly. Maybe you're sorry now, but the damage is done. I wasn't someone you protected. You used me as a test subject. My voice cracked on the last word. It wasn't anger anymore. It was grief. I took a deep breath, feeling something inside me harden, crystallize into certainty. This breakup you staged, I said quietly, it's real now. His breath caught. Behind him, one of his friends gasped. Another whispered, dude. But I didn't take it back. I'm done, I continued, not because I failed your test, but because you thought testing me was acceptable in the first place." He stared at me helplessly, like he was only now realizing the gravity of what he'd lost. "Please," he whispered, "don't go." But I had already reached the doorway. I looked back one last time. "You should have trusted me," I said. "You should have chosen me." Then I turned and walked out before he could say another word. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. My hands were shaking. And yet, for the first time in months, I felt clarity. Painful clarity. Necessary clarity. The kind that comes only when a truth cuts deep enough to wake you. When I walked out of that apartment, the hallway felt colder than I remembered. My footsteps echoed sharply against the tile, sounding far louder than they should. Maybe it was because everything inside me was too quiet. Shock settling into my bones, wrapping around my ribs like a band that wouldn't loosen. By the time I reached the parking lot, my hands were trembling so hard I could barely fit the key into the ignition. I sat there for a moment, headlights glowing against the dark pavement, my breath fogging the windshield. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but the tears didn't come. Instead, there was a strange, hollow numbness spreading inside my chest. Then my phone buzzed. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. I glanced down. His name, his friends' names. Unknown numbers. They were already messaging me. I opened the first one, pure reflex, but I regretted it instantly. "You're overreacting. It was a harmless test. We were trying to help him see if you were genuine. You made everything worse by taking it so seriously." A fresh wave of disbelief washed over me. They truly had no idea how cruel they were. Or worse, they didn't care. I blocked them all, one by one. Every message, every number, every attempt to twist the narrative. But the buzzing didn't stop. Now he was calling. 10 missed calls, then 12, then 16. I let every single one ring out. Because what could he possibly say? What apology would fix the fact that he'd chosen humiliation over trust? Around midnight, he finally texted. "It was a mistake. I am so sorry. It got out of hand. Please talk to me." I stared at the screen for a long time before typing back. "You had 2 years to talk to me about doubts. Instead, you staged a breakup with an audience. There's nothing left to discuss." I hit send, turned off my phone, and sat in the dark car for a moment before going inside, feeling like the floor beneath my life had quietly disappeared. The next morning, my world expanded in the worst possible way, because now strangers knew what had happened. I woke to a flurry of notifications, dozens of messages from numbers I didn't recognize. One of his friends had told people, then those people told others. Soon my inbox was full of unsolicited opinions. Some defended him, saying relationship tests were normal. Others called me cold for walking away without giving him a chance. But the loudest voices were the ones calling out the toxicity. Who tests their partner like that? That's emotional manipulation. You dodged a bullet. It should have been comforting. But instead I felt exposed, violated. This wasn't just between me and him anymore. His friends had made sure of that. Around noon, my phone rang again, but this time it was a different number. I answered cautiously. "Hello?" A soft, older woman's voice came through the speaker. "This is his mother." My breath froze. "I heard what happened," she continued gently, "and I am so sorry." Tears pricked at my eyes for the first time since last night, not because her apology hurt, but because it was the first moment someone acknowledged the pain I'd been trying so hard to hold together. "I taught him better than this," she said, voice breaking. "I don't know why he let those boys influence him so much. They've always encouraged the worst parts of him." "It wasn't just them," I said quietly. "He agreed. He planned it." "I know." She exhaled shakily. "I told him that this morning. He's devastated. But you're right to walk away. You deserve someone who cherishes you, not someone who lets others convince him to wound you." We talked for several minutes. She apologized again and again, and before hanging up, she added softly, "You are still welcome at our home, even if you never come back into his life." When the call ended, I sat on the edge of my bed, holding the phone in my lap, feeling my heart crumble just a little more, because her kindness was a reminder of everything I had almost built with him, everything that now lay in ruins. By Sunday morning, the fallout had grown even larger. Someone had posted about the situation on social media, no names, but enough details that anyone who knew us could guess. Opinions exploded in the comments. People picked sides. Some were vicious, some were sympathetic, some were simply entertained. And he stayed silent. His friends, however, didn't. They insisted it wasn't abuse. They insisted I was dramatic. They insisted I had humiliated him by leaving. The cognitive dissonance was almost impressive. My own friends tried to defend me online, sharing stories they'd never told me, moments when his group had been manipulative, invasive, or undermining. Things I'd brushed off, or been too in love to notice. It hurt, but it also clarified something I'd been avoiding. This breakup wasn't one moment, it was the accumulation of 1,000 tiny betrayals. On Monday morning, I received a message from him. Only one line. Can we please meet? Just talk? I'll come to you. I stared at the text for several minutes. Part of me wanted to delete it. Part of me wanted answers, closure, something to stitch together the gaping wound he'd left inside me. In the end, I said yes. A neutral place, a coffee shop near my apartment, somewhere public, somewhere safe. And when he walked in Tuesday afternoon, I didn't recognize him, not physically, but emotionally. He looked deflated, exhausted, eyes red, shoulders slumped, guilt weighing him down. He sat across from me and broke instantly into tears. I'm so sorry, he whispered, voice shaking. I don't know what I was thinking. It was stupid. It was cruel. I hate myself for it. I sat still, hands wrapped around the warm mug, heart steady but guarded. Why? I asked softly. Why did you do it? He looked at the table, then at me, then away again. Because I was scared, he admitted. We were getting serious, and I panicked. The guys kept saying you were too perfect, that you had to be hiding something, that we should test you. And you trusted them over me? I asked. He let out a strangled breath. I know how that sounds, I know. I looked into his eyes I once loved so fully, and felt something deep in my chest fall quiet. Love was still there, but trust had bled out completely. His friends were poison, but he had let them drip into him, into us, until our relationship drowned. His final words that afternoon broke me and healed me all at once. Tell me how to fix this. I shook my head slowly. You can't. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw him understand. Not fight, not rationalize, not minimize. Just understand. The test had ended. And he had failed far more than he ever expected. The days after our coffee shop conversation felt strangely empty, as if the world had gone quiet just to force me to hear the sound of my own heartbreak. Not the sharp kind of heartbreak, the kind that comes suddenly and violently. No, this was different. This was the slow, heavy ache that sits inside your chest like a stone, the kind that doesn't scream, doesn't explode, just weighs. Every morning I woke up feeling like something was missing. Something I had held for 2 years had slipped out of my hands, and even though I knew logically that I had made the right choice, my heart hadn't caught up yet. I tried to stay busy. Work, chores, walking around my neighborhood with a coffee in hand, pretending the air didn't taste like loss. But no matter how much I tried to distract myself, my mind found its way back to him. Back to the living room. Back to the looks on their faces. Back to the screenshot that changed everything. I would lie in bed at night and replay the moment he said, "It's over," and the moment I saw the flicker of anticipation in his friend's eyes. That moment haunted me more than any part of the breakup itself. Because it wasn't just betrayal, it was participation. It was entertainment. It was people I barely knew hoping to witness my pain. And he let them. That realization alone carved something deep inside me. A week after the coffee shop meeting, I finally broke down. It happened on a random Thursday. No trigger, no warning. I was folding clothes when my hands suddenly stopped moving. The sweater I held slipped out of my grip and fell to the floor like a surrender flag. And then the tears came. Not a few, not soft ones. It was the kind of crying that steals your breath. The kind that feels like your body is trying to expel something poisonous. The kind that makes your chest curl inward and your knees give out. I sank onto the floor and let myself unravel. Pain I had been holding back spilled out of me in waves, each one harder than the last. I cried for the betrayal. I cried for the humiliation. I cried for the version of him I thought I knew. And I cried for myself, for the woman who had believed in a love that wasn't given the same respect in return. At some point, I whispered into the empty room, "Why wasn't I enough?" And the silence that followed was deafening. But even as I choked on the grief, a small, soft voice inside me, one I had forgotten, whispered back, "It's not about being enough, it's about being treated as if you are." Those words didn't heal me instantly, but they sat with me. They stayed. People often romanticize pain, as if heartbreak automatically transforms you into someone wiser or stronger. But the truth is uglier. Real healing isn't poetic. It's tedious. It's quiet. It's lonely. I avoided restaurants we used to go to. I avoided music he liked. I avoided routes that passed by his apartment. simple survival tactics, necessary ones. Even though he wasn't contacting me anymore, his absence had a presence of its own. I felt it in every empty space where our routines used to live, in the silence of my phone, in the untouched side of my bed. Loss has a way of echoing. My friends checked in, called, texted, invited me out. I appreciated it, but I also hated feeling like a wounded bird they were trying to help stand. I wasn't ready to laugh yet. I wasn't ready to pretend I was okay. So I withdrew, quietly, gently, not out of depression, but out of exhaustion. I needed time to rebuild the parts of myself I had given away too freely, time to let my heart understand what my mind already knew. But the lowest point, the real bottom of everything, came late one night when I woke up from a dream that felt a little too real. In the dream, he was sitting beside me on my couch, smiling the way he used to. He reached for my hand, gentle, familiar, warm, and for a moment I felt safe. When I woke up, my hand was still outstretched, and I realized I was reaching for someone who wasn't there, someone who had chosen to hurt me. That was the moment the reality sank in fully. I wasn't mourning the relationship I had, I was mourning the relationship I thought I had. I was grieving a person who had existed only in my hope, not in his actions. And with that realization came the sharp, painful truth. He had never loved me in the way I loved him. Not fully, not faithfully, not with the kind of depth that protects instead of tests. I curled into myself on the bed, feeling every bit of that truth settle into me like frost. I had reached my breaking point, the bottom of the emotional well, the darkest part of the story. But somewhere beneath that darkness, a faint ember remained, a small, steady promise that the next part wouldn't be about losing him. It would be about finding myself again. Rock bottom has a strange quietness to it. Once you've cried every tear, once the rage softens, once the grief settles, something unexpected begins to happen. You start hearing yourself again. Not the broken version, not the betrayed version, the true version. And for me, that shift began with something completely ordinary: grocery shopping. It was early November, a cold evening, with wind sneaking under my coat. I hadn't slept well for days, but I was finally trying to re-enter my routines. I pushed my cart down an aisle, numb but functional, focused on the simple act of choosing fruit, something mindless, something safe. Then I felt someone freeze beside me. I looked up. It was him. For a second, we just stared. No anger, no yelling, no scripted apologies. Just two people standing in the fluorescent light of a produce section, surrounded by oranges and silence. "Hi," he said softly. "Hi," I replied. There was a long pause. Shoppers moved around us. Carts squeaked past. Overhead announcements droned. But between us, it felt like time hesitated. He swallowed. "I'm in therapy." That sentence caught me off guard. Not because it changed anything, but because of its honesty. "I'm dealing with why I let other people make decisions for me," he said, voice so fragile it almost broke. "Why I valued their opinions more than my own judgment. Why I didn't see what I was doing to you." I stood still watching him, not with hope, but with clarity. "That's good," I said quietly, and I meant it. Healing isn't something I would ever wish against him. Just because I couldn't be part of his life didn't mean I wanted it to crumble. He nodded, eyes glossy. "I'm not telling you because I want you back. I know that's not happening. I'm telling you because you deserve to know that you leaving was a wake-up call. I needed it. I didn't realize how toxic they were or how much I let them shape me. I'm sorry." There was something freeing in hearing those words, not because I needed the apology to move on, but because it confirmed something I had been wrestling with. It really wasn't my fault. I wasn't too perfect. I wasn't suspicious. I wasn't untrustworthy. I wasn't someone who needed to be tested. He was someone who needed to grow. And I finally saw the line between our worlds, not the version where I tried to fit into his chaos, but the version where I stepped out of it. "I'm glad you're getting help," I said. Truly. He nodded again, looking at me as if he wanted to say 1,000 things, but instead he stepped aside, giving me space. That moment was our real goodbye, not dramatic, not explosive, just honest, quiet, human. I walked away first. As I turned the corner into the next aisle, something inside me clicked into place, a truth that felt like a door unlocking. I had spent 2 years loving someone who didn't know how to love without fear, and his healing was his journey, not mine. But the real shift, the core of the turning point, came a few days later. One of his old friends, someone who had always stayed neutral, sent me a message, not to defend him, not to guilt trip me, just one line. You were right to leave. They pressured him into everything. It wasn't about you, it was about their own insecurities. I read that sentence 5 times, and then it hit me. I had been blaming myself quietly, secretly, subconsciously for weeks. Had I done something wrong? Had I been too calm, too trusting, too unaware? But no, it wasn't me. It was them. It was him. His inability to set boundaries, to trust, to choose love over the comfort of childhood friendships that refused to grow up. For the first time since the breakup, I felt something unfamiliar rise inside me. Strength. Not the fierce, angry kind, not the defensive kind, but the gentle, grounded strength that comes from knowing your worth. From realizing, I deserve someone who valued me, someone who trusted me without tests, someone who didn't need validation from others to choose me, someone whose love wasn't conditional upon performance or suffering. More importantly, I deserve peace. The kind of peace that doesn't require constant emotional contortions. The kind of peace that doesn't allow others to turn my love into a spectacle. The kind of peace that comes when I choose myself. For the first time in a long time, I felt proud of myself. Not for leaving, anyone can walk away, but for refusing to return, for refusing to shrink, for refusing to let betrayal define my worth. The darkest moment had passed, and in its place, something new was growing, steady, quiet, and powerful. I wasn't healed yet, but I was no longer broken. I was becoming whole again. Fallout doesn't arrive with explosions. It arrives quietly, like cracks forming in the ground beneath the people who caused the damage. And once those cracks start spreading, no one can stop them, not even the ones who created them. For weeks after the breakup, I stayed silent. I didn't post anything. I didn't defend myself online. I didn't participate in any of the conversations swirling around me. And that silence, it was the most powerful decision I had ever made. Because while I healed in private, the consequences for him and his friends grew louder every day. It began with the group chat. Someone in their circle leaked screenshots of the conversations his friends had been having. The ones where they planned the test breakup, the ones where they joked about recording me crying, the ones where they treated my emotions like entertainment. People reacted exactly as you'd expect. Shock, disgust, arguments erupting in threads, others calling out the emotional manipulation for what it was. His friends panicked. Some tried to defend themselves. Some denied everything. Some blamed him for agreeing to the plan. And slowly their perfect little friend group, the one that had seemed so united, so inseparable, so untouchable, started to fracture. Because now everyone saw what I had seen too late. They weren't loyal, they were toxic, and their loyalty existed only when convenient. Some of their girlfriends broke up with them. A few mutual acquaintances cut ties completely. Others stepped away quietly, unwilling to be associated with the cruelty. Within a month, the group that had once controlled his every decision barely spoke to each other anymore. Poetic justice doesn't always look like revenge. Sometimes it looks like truth finally being seen. But the fallout didn't stop with his friends. It reached his family too. His mother messaged me again. Not often, just small check-ins, little slices of kindness meant to reassure me that she still valued me, even though her son had hurt me so deeply. One day she wrote, "We talked again. He finally understands what he lost. He's trying to change, but I want you to know I don't blame you. You did the right thing." Her message didn't heal the wound, but it eased the sting. A week later, someone told me that his parents were disappointed. Not in me, not in the breakup, but in him. Disappointed that he allowed his friends to dictate something so intimate. Disappointed that he had chosen immaturity over integrity. Disappointed that he had hurt someone they genuinely liked. I didn't celebrate their disappointment, but I understood it. Some lessons in life arrive through heartbreak. Some arrive through the loss of respect. He was experiencing both. Meanwhile, he kept his distance. No more messages, no more apologies, no desperate attempts to win me back. I think he finally understood that there was a difference between regret and repair, and that he could only offer the first. But a few mutual acquaintances updated me on him, even when I didn't ask. He's keeping to himself these days? He stopped talking to the guys completely. He said losing you was the lowest point of his life. He's embarrassed by what happened. Sometimes I wondered if he wished the night of that fake breakup had gone differently, if he wished I had walked in blind, cried, begged, given them the reaction they wanted, if he wished he hadn't been exposed in such a stark, humiliating way. But then I reminded myself, If I hadn't seen that message the night before, I would have walked into that apartment completely unprotected, and they would have enjoyed watching me break. So no, there was no alternate version of this story where we ended up together. The truth had always been waiting. In early winter, I ran into one of his former friends, the only one in their group who had remained neutral, the one who had sent me that message saying I was right to leave. He looked embarrassed, almost remorseful. "For what it's worth," he said softly, "he really is trying to be better." I nodded. "I hope he is." "You don't hate him?" he asked. "No," I replied, "but I don't belong in his story anymore." He looked down, then back at me. "They all regret it, all of them." I smiled faintly, not out of satisfaction, but out of understanding. "Regret doesn't erase actions," I said gently. "It just reminds you not to repeat them." He nodded, unable to argue. Before he walked away, he added, "You were the best thing that ever happened to him." Maybe I was. But love isn't measured by loss. It's measured by how you treat someone while you have them. By the time 4 months had passed, the fallout had fully settled. He moved to another part of the city, got a new job, stopped spending time with his old friends. People said he'd grown quieter, more reflective, less reactive, less dependent on others. His mother told me, through one last gentle text, that therapy was helping him learn how to build boundaries, how to trust, how to choose his own voice. I was glad, truly. But his healing wasn't mine to hold. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel revenge. I felt peace, because the universe had handled everything I refused to dirty my hands with. His actions had judged themselves, his consequences had grown naturally, and my silence had been louder than any retaliation ever could be. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, I realized something profound. Walking away hadn't broken me, it had freed me. The woman who left that apartment months ago was devastated. The woman who stood here now, she was whole, strong, steady, and ready for the life she deserved, one built not on tests, but on trust. Healing didn't arrive in one sudden wave. It came quietly, in small moments, the kind you don't notice until they've woven into your life so gently that one day you look up and realize you're not hurting anymore. There was the morning I woke up and didn't think about him first. The afternoon I laughed, really laughed, with a friend over something stupid. The night I cooked dinner for myself and felt peaceful. Piece by piece, the weight fell off my shoulders. I didn't need his apology to move on. I didn't need his friend's regret to validate my pain. I didn't need anyone to tell me I did the right thing. I knew. Deep in my bones, I knew. Because choosing yourself isn't an act of selfishness. It's an act of survival. And I had survived something I didn't even realize had been crushing me. I've been on a few dates since then. Nothing serious, nothing rushed, just small reminders that the world is bigger than the boy who chose to test me instead of trust me. One woman I met for coffee asked about my last relationship. I gave her the short version, her face twisted in horror. "Who does that to someone they say they love?" she asked. "Someone who doesn't know what love actually looks like," I answered. She took my hand gently and said, "For what it's worth, you handled it with grace. But grace isn't for them. Grace is for me. It's the freedom of letting go without bitterness. It's the strength of moving forward without dragging the pain behind me. It's the quiet dignity of knowing my worth even when someone else couldn't see it." Sometimes late at night, I replay everything, not out of longing, but out of gratitude. Gratitude that I saw the truth before I tied my life to someone who didn't value it. Gratitude that I didn't waste more years trying to prove I was worthy of trust I had already earned. Gratitude that I walked away before the damage became permanent. He found his path, I found mine. And although our roads will never cross again, I genuinely hope he becomes the kind of man who never repeats that mistake. The kind of man who learns love is not a performance, or a test, or an experiment. Because real love, the kind worth giving your heart to, is honest. It's steady, it's safe. And that's the lesson I'm taking with me. If someone needs to break your heart just to see if you care, they never deserved your heart in the first place. I didn't dodge a breakup, I dodged a future I wasn't meant for. And in losing him, I found myself again.